Hey guys, and welcome back to the Warwick F1 show. This is episode 17 of the 2025 season, and in this episode today we're going to be unpacking the events of the Imola Grand Prix. Now, again, I am not going here to say the long name attached to it, so we're just going to refer to it as the Imola Grand Prix. I'm your host here, Anwar, and once again I'm joined by returning guests Daniel and Lucy. Thank you guys for coming on. I guess I want to get your first impressions from this weekend. Were we surprised at how entertaining it was? Because I thought this was a barn burner, considering that we're at Imola.
A barn burner, that's a new one. I don't think
I've ever heard that idiom before.
But if it means what I think it means, then I agree.
Yeah.
There were a few factors that made the weekend quite strong, I think. There was a headwind down the main straight, which meant slipstream and DRS were more effective, so more overtaking. There was obviously the step softer in compounds, which meant the two-stop strategy, which is good. The only downside to a two-stop strategy is that it gets quite hard to track where all the drivers are in their battles and who stopped and when, but obviously you could have timing data to help with that. A couple battles for the lead, some barn-burning overtakes is the word I'd use.
I can agree with that. There was some phenomenal really take barn burner and bring it all the way right around. But it's a very good overtaking throughout. I think we have this impression of Imola being a very hard circuit to overtake, and I think the drivers know that, and they've put their neck on the line with some of those overtakes, particularly Verstappen around the outside in turn one. That was, for me, the highlight of all the overtaking this weekend. I think that was phenomenal. But I guess we obviously aren't seeing Imola anymore from here on out for quite a while, by the looks of things. Does this race make us feel bad that we're not seeing it again?
I feel like before this race, I was kind of okay about the idea of saying goodbye to Imola, because the racing's not always been great, and when the racing has been good in the past, it's generally been, I'm thinking of 2021, 2020, 2022, when it was raining and it kind of felt like it could only kind of deliver well as a race when it was also a wet race. I think that, I know you hate it when we talk about tyres, but they brought us step softer tyres, and I think, it made it more exciting. It felt like there were more things to do with drivers being on older compounds and therefore maybe more vulnerable to overtakes, and it just felt more exciting and more alive. And so now I'm kind of sad to see it go. It feels weird that we've only had 5 races at Imola since it came back onto the calendar, because I've kind of got attached to it.
I think this race particularly, I think it's something that we've been crying out for a while in terms of having 2 viable strategies, one being a 1-stop, one being a 2-stop. We've been crying for that type of thing. And I think today but this weekend showed that the racing can be really damn entertaining if we have that kind of variability. So, I think in that case, if we don't see that as a continued trend, I think it's pretty sad that we're not going to have that type of race again. Who wants to do the race rundown here?
I can do that.
Let's do it, Daniel. Take it away.
All right. So we had Max Verstappen, who won the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix after the spirit of Ayrton Senna possessed him at the first corner. He saw a gap that existed, and he went for it and overtook Oscar Piastri, which is great. Lando Norris finished in second place and is doing the bare minimum to stay in this championship fight. Oscar Piastri rounded out the podium in third. He watched as not one but 2 safety car periods kind of put paid to his chances. I don't know, maybe that's karma for butchering the griddy 2 weeks ago or something. So maybe he was winning races off Aura alone or something. I don't know about that. Lewis Hamilton, he finished P4 in Ferrari, which would have exceeded all his expectations coming into the weekend. But, the expectations were probably lower than his car's ride height in China. Albon, P5. Williams doing a great job. The podium kind of looked on for Albon until it looked off, then on again, and then nearly fully off.
Nearly completely gone.
Nearly completely gone, thanks to the P6 finisher, Charles Leclerc, who drove quite an angry race to finish P6. In all honesty, he was complaining about a lot on the radio. George Russell finished P7, which is his worst result of the season. Mercedes didn't seem to have much pace at all. He was quite a backseat driver to Piastri in the first corner in terms of criticism and how close to his car he got. Carlos Sainz finished P8 for Williams. He was also disappointed with that, but he can blame a different part of the team this time compared to Miami. Isaac Hadjar is in P9 to get 2 points. He's reached second Red Bull seat performance, but Yuki Tsunoda finished P10, which maybe means he's reached Racing Bull performance. But he did start from the pit lane, which was an impressive drive from him. Fernando Alonso finished less than a second off his first point of the season, despite a P5 start, which is painful for him. Maybe he'll be doing a budget remake of Brazil 2012 stare after that. Nico Hülkenberg was kind of flirting with the points the whole race, but just like the podium, it never really happened. Didn't like him back. Pierre Gasly finished 13th after going off into the gravel early on. Maybe he saw an Alpine fan in the stands and went into shock or something, who knows. Liam Lawson in 14th. He's trying, I guess. Is all we can say.
He's trying.
For Liam Lawson at the moment.
The poor guy's doing his best, but his best isn't good enough, is it?
Not quite. Not for now. Still got bearing the scars, bearing the cross of the Red Bull second seat. Lance Stroll was P15. I mean, his strategy for giving the shortest interviews in F1 history are better than the strategy in the race. So,
which we can't even blame him for, let's be honest.
Yeah, I know, but, you know, he's...
Aston saw that they had two cars starting in the top 10 and didn't really know what to do and decided that the only course of action was to mess both their races up.
I think they were just in shock.
Way out of their depth, right? They couldn't handle it. Colapinto finished P16, but he managed to keep the car in one piece. Maybe Jack Doohan's going to try rectifying that for Monaco. We'll see about that. Oliver Behrman was P17. Poor race from him, really, but he was kind of he was in fake it till you make it mode, I guess, when he was driving second to Verstappen under the safety car.
Haas were just nowhere across the weekend.
In general, yeah.
Yeah, it felt like Behrman. It felt like I think he only pitted 3 times, but it felt like he was permanently pitting to fix some sort of issue.
It did feel like that, didn't it? I mean, it's not as bad as his teammate who stopped on lap 1 and then realised that there was actually tyre degradation, so he couldn't do that anymore. He retired on lap 27. The last of the finisher was a Sauber, so Anwar, you can rejoice about that and their useless existence that they lead.
All hate Sauber.
Gabriel Bortoletto was quite a way off everyone else, and Kimi Antonelli was the second and final DNF of the race. I guess his car was probably the second worst thing for Italian fans to see breaking, behind only Spaghetti, maybe?
Spaghetti breaking is disgraceful.
Exactly,
so,
it's heresy, right?
Yeah. So I can get on board with that. That's the most entertaining race rundown we've had in quite a while.
Thank you.
You're showing me up. I need to be more fun when
Sorry
I do
about
it.
that.
There's standards to this.
It's okay. Come on, Nico. I'll come with a pre-prepared 15-page script.
But nothing will happen, so just...
I'll still bring a script.
You're going to struggle with that one.
Yeah, not much to talk
good
about,
luck with that. Give me the good races to run down and I'll
I
do my
guess I think we should start with the performance of Max Verstappen, because we've come off the back of Oscar Piastri winning 3 times in a row, and we kind of expected him to continue that type of form, or at least McLaren to continue that type of form. But that didn't really materialise, did it? With Verstappen starting the race in second, disrupting the McLaren dominance, I guess, in qualifying, and then proceeding to convert that into a race win after a first corner overtake. Firstly, how impressive was that overtake by Verstappen?
I was gassed after that overtake, Anwar, honestly. I think in the pantheon of great lap 1, turn 1 moves, it's probably up there with the best in recent memory, being maybe Verstappen again in Mexico 2021 when he drove around the outside of both Mercedes, or even recently George Russell in Spain 2024 when he ran the outside of both Verstappen and Norris. There were just sometimes these moments of genius from these drivers who put their cars inch perfect to use all the road in ways that we haven't quite seen before, which, especially on a driver like Oscar Piastri as well, who's shown that he has brilliant racecraft. I think this was quite an unusual slip-up from him. Maybe his first mistake in a race since probably Australia. He's had a couple in qualifying, but no, this was something else.
I think the more impressive thing was the fact that Verstappen's start wasn't particularly great. He looked like he was going against George Russell into turn one, and positioned his car perfectly in order to sweep around the outside. Lucy, do you think that Piastri was too conservative and should have fought him a little bit more here?
I mean, Piastri, I think himself in his interview said that he just braked too early and that kind of he left too much space kind of ahead in the corner for Verstappen to brake later and go around the outside. To be honest, I didn't really see it coming. Like I saw the start, and Piastri got a much better start. His start was like 0.24 and Verstappen's was 0.36 or something like that. I thought Verstappen was going against George Russell and maybe even unknown Lando Norris was going to slip round the outside or something like that. But no, then it felt like he just didn't brake and like going into the chicane, and it was slightly insane. So I think Piastri probably kind of, even if kind of it's Piastri's first time fighting for like a title against Verstappen as one of his main rivals, he's seen how Verstappen races, which is late on the brakes, and probably should have left him less room so that he wouldn't be able to swing round the outside of that corner. But also saying that it was just because Piastri was too conservative kind of does a disservice to the brilliance of that overtake.
I mean, he was really clever as well in his car placement with George Russell, because he kind of boxed Russell in behind Piastri. Russell had a better kind of launch and slipstream than both of them going down to the first corner, but he couldn't make anything of it because Max was there with his car in the way, which is what he knows how to do so well. You were right about Piastri. It's kind of weird because it wasn't even like he was on the racing line into the corner. He was on the kind of the inside. It was kind of inviting Max to go around the outside.
It felt almost like he was so concerned with maybe avoiding what happened to Norris in Miami. We were so concerned with getting through the first corner and not ending up beached in the gravel that he kind of was almost maybe a little kind of, he focused too much on surviving the first corner as opposed to winning the first corner.
Maybe he is in conservative mode, just kind of taking the points that he has and making them last, and his championship advantage for as long as he can. If he's thinking about that at the moment, maybe it still wins for him that he wants. But
it's ultimately pretty early to have that
exactly.
kind of internal discussion. We're only 7 races in now, so it's not.
And also, the McLaren was still a good car. There's definitely the possibility that had there not been all the stuff with timings of the VSC and some slightly slow pit stops from McLaren, that, I don't know, maybe either of the McLaren cars could have been in a closer battle with Verstappen, maybe some lucky DRS and things like that. If, like, after the VSC, Verstappen was like 24 seconds ahead because he pitted under the VSC when both McLarens had pitted beforehand. And so, to be honest, it may also have been that kind of coming out of that first corner, both Piastri and McLaren thought that kind of there would be the possibility come the pit stop phase where, with a well-timed undercut and some good outlaps, it could get closer again and it wouldn't kind of just signal the end of the race.
But ultimately, we're saying all of this, but I think Verstappen has given himself the luxury of being a little bit lucky there by being in first. By making that overtake, he was able to ride his luck a little bit with the safety cars. And the other thing is, Verstappen had it on pace as well. It wasn't exactly McLaren were by far and away the quickest car in that race, because Verstappen did produce a gap to Piastri over the first few laps. He provided himself with a 2.5 second, 3 second cushion.
Yeah.
And that normally does insulate you from the dangers of a undercut, at least for a lap. Now, obviously, it would have been the VSC that had come out first, right? So he was able to get away with a little bit there, but you make your own luck if you're in the lead. So by far, like, it was a very, very good performance, and I think a lot of people I've seen are beginning to actually count him in this championship battle now. Do we think this result alone is enough for us to start having that discussion or entertaining that? Or do we think we need to wait some more and see if he can snag a few wins here and there, let's say in Spain or somewhere like that? Do you think only then we can have that discussion?
I don't think we should ever have counted him out of the championship battle, to be honest. The idea of that now this result means that we should count him into the championship battle is kind of doesn't make a lot of sense to me, because it feels like we should have just... my default mode is assume Verstappen's in a championship fight
He gets a free pass.
unless something happens, which is like, okay, he's statistically it could be like Verstappen was like 100 points behind, and I'd still, but as long as he could feasibly win the championship, I'd still say he probably could do it, because he is seemingly, no matter what his car is like, he is permanently there fighting.
Yeah, you say Max put himself and Red Bull put themselves in a good position to win the race. I think McLaren also kind of compromised their own race with Piastri's strategy. Obviously, it was slightly unlucky, but at the same time, boxing into so much traffic meant that the undercut would have been, or at least to get closer, to get within the DRS range of Verstappen, it would have been a lot harder to do.
It makes your life more difficult, right? Exactly,
especially on a track like Imola, where historically overtaking has been a lot harder. It wasn't on Sunday, but that's for Piastri, it was largely him being a juggernaut and moving through the pack at a rate of knots like he was, because he's a formidable driver with great racecraft. But, McLaren can't afford, they seemed almost content with a P2, P3 finish, the team bosses in particular, which they can't afford to do, because Zak Brown has already made clear this year that he fully expects a Norris-Piastri collision at some point, and possibly a double DNF. And if that happens, you bet your bottom dollar that Max Verstappen's going to be the one to capitalise, right? That's
100%.
That's a 25-point swing. The gap is already 22 points, covering the top three in the championship. So that's Max Verstappen in the lead of the championship if it happens in Monaco, which it likely won't. But at the same time, if we see this situation when we're a few races from the end of the championship and he's this close, they cannot afford to let him win, because that point gap between second and first is greater than anywhere else in the finishing order. So it's not acceptable really to let him have that.
I think this has to be a little bit of a rarity, right? Because you can, as McLaren, you said previously that they should be winning both of these championships at a canter with the car that they've got, and I think they're putting it under threat by slightly by kind of enabling or not really pushing Red Bull to the max here. Because I think we can count them on, we can say that they were unlucky with the strategy, because a lot of people did get caught out. But I think it was clear that there was an opportunity today, this weekend, and I don't think they took it. Let's move on to the McLarens themselves here. Do we think, I saw a bit of discourse about the fact that they let Piastri and Norris fight, because Piastri and Norris were like second and third in the running order. Piastri had slightly older tyres than Norris did, yet we saw them fight rather than do a little bit of a car swap to try and allow Norris at Verstappen. Do you think that was a fair decision for them to make, or would we say that they were wrong to let them fight and they should have pursued the victory a little bit more?
To be honest, I think there's a couple of things. Firstly, I think the fact that McLaren's default is just let the drivers fight is probably, again, slightly emblematic of the fact that it still feels like their attitude this season is to sort of just avoid prioritising any driver as number one over any sort of result, sort of try and keep harmony between Norris and Piastri as like their number one priority. To be honest, I didn't mind them letting Norris fight. It was Norris and Piastri fight. It was pretty obvious given the tyre differential that Norris was going to win. Obviously, maybe had they both DNF'd, we would be saying something different, but they didn't. And it seemed like Verstappen had the pace, even with the safety car bunching everyone back together.
Yes.
To keep driving away, or even if he didn't drive away into the distance, at least maintain a gap and not get caught by the McLarens. So I didn't mind them saying let Norris and Piastri fight, because I think that given the lap times and the fact that there wasn't much of a tyre differential and things like that, it didn't really feel at that point like there was a very good chance that they were going to get the victory. Had they just said, okay, Piastri, coming up to the safety car line, you've got to let Norris through and let him go after Verstappen. I think with everyone bunched up under the safety car, if anything, that could have caused more problems with Piastri not on great tyres, with like Hamilton on some really quick tyres coming through.
At the end as well, Hamilton was he's within 1.5 seconds at the end of that race. So if maybe a couple more laps, then Piastri wouldn't have finished where he finished. He would have finished one place below, right? So that was ultimately a threat. And I think it could have turned out. Would you agree that it could have turned out a lot worse?
Yeah, it could have been worse, but it could have been better as well at
Yeah.
the same time. It seems like McLaren's strategy for this year is just to build a really fast car so their drivers are the only ones in contention, and then they can really exercise their number one philosophy of just let them fight it out. But obviously with Max in behind, it's not really an option for this year because he's so close to them. I think Andrea Stella's logic after the race was that if Norris wasn't able to overtake Piastri with relative ease, because obviously there was that tyre offset, then he wouldn't have been able to take Max, which is fair enough, I guess. I mean, you could look at it from the perspective of you have to try to invert the cars to put pressure on Max, but at the same time, yeah, it was kind of lost, and Piastri fell back and almost fell victim to Hamilton as well. So there was a bit of risk with that, but that was more due to Piastri's strategy being a bit offset to everyone else.
Which ultimately isn't his fault, and I don't even levy a lot of blame towards McLaren here either. I think it's like it was a bit of a catch-22 where you were damned if you do, damned if you don't, because they tried something to try and put pressure. Ultimately, the two-stop, it was something different. It gave Red Bull something to think about, I guess. But with the events in the race happening as the way they did, it didn't materialise well.
Yeah, the two-stop thing almost kind of could have been interesting had like the safety car happened when it did, and so everyone kind of got bunched together, but we didn't have everyone, seemingly everyone who wasn't Piastri and Albon having a new set of tyres that they could box and put on, where it effectively meant that Piastri, in trying to make some headway with some fresher tyres, actually ended up with tyres that were just older than everyone else's.
I guess the kind of big outcome is the championship has been reduced by 3 points. So Norris, even though I feel he wasn't really at his best this weekend, he has made inroads in regards to where he is against his teammate. I guess my question is, does this give you any confidence that he will continue to fight it, or are we still uncertain whether he's got it?
Well, I mean, his move around the outside of Piastri was convincing enough that he really wants to fight for it, and he can. It wasn't really a straight fight, obviously, with the tyre deficit, but I think that Norris, he is still working on getting comfortable with that car. We saw in qualifying that it is not quite where he wants it yet, so he's still going to have to work at that. But while that's going on, I think he'll be quite grateful for how the race panned out and that 3-point swing that went in his favour in the end. I think it could come down to something like that at the end of the season, obviously. So it's fine for him at the moment. It's not quite panic stations, but he wanna keep going and improving in the qualifying especially.
Yeah, I think he did ultimately throw a little bit, but throw it away in qualifying, particularly in Q3. I don't think he had 2 very good laps at all, in truth. Let's move on from the McLaren discussion and move towards the discussion of the Ferraris. Lewis Hamilton finished in 4th, and that kind of caught me by surprise because neither of those cars started in the top 10 this weekend. Is this symptomatic of where Ferrari are at the moment? We just don't know.
Ferrari had an absolute mare of a qualifying, it would be fair to say. In fact, it felt like just all of Italy had a mare of a Q2 because Antonelli was also out, but that's not the point. To be honest, it feels like this season that's been the pattern for Ferrari to have, well, even if it wasn't terrible, most of the time they're not out in Q2, to have kind of lackluster qualifyings and then sort of show up in the race or just be anonymous. It feels like qualifying's been their main... one of them. It's been a problem for them. I was going to say their main problem, but they've had a lot of problems, so qualifying's been a problem. To be honest, the Ferraris did seem to have some pace. I don't know whether I would have said they were on for P4, P6. I wasn't surprised that they got some points.
I feel that's the minimum, right? Ferrari has to be in the points, no?
Especially at their home race as well, right? It's unacceptable if they're not, which was kind of the case in Q2. That was quite a shock, to be honest. But yeah, this is the first time that Hamilton's finished ahead of Leclerc in a Grand Prix, I believe, this year, which is quite telling.
He
Maybe
did ultimately get that sprint win, though.
the season. Yeah, we keep banking on the sprint win, but like false dawn much, But they had very different approaches during the race. Lewis Hamilton was pretty, I'd use the word happy, to be honest, with how the car was going. He said the setup felt great. And at the checkered flag, he was galvanising the team, saying this felt so much better, we can do this, which maybe shows the difference in approach to Leclerc, for example, who, and I quote after the race, said he cannot accept the situation that he's in, whereas Lewis Hamilton was praising the car and saying that the team did a much better job than before. So they're kind of very contrasting ways of motivating the team that they're in, which I think's very interesting in terms of how they go about being the number one driver and leading that team. Ultimately, I can understand why Leclerc was frustrated, because he was on the suboptimal strategy. He stopped early on. He did undercut a lot of cars. He was Mr. Undercut in the first. I think he stopped on lap 10 or something.
He was one of the first ones among the leading pack to make that.
Yes,
switch.
And he undercut George Russell, which was key for his race. But then overall, at the safety car restart, he had no tyres left. There was a moment over the radio where he was like, do we have new softs? He wanted to go for the softs at the end. They were going to box, and then it was a miscommunication, because then Hamilton went into the pits, and he's like, wait, why is Lewis in the box? I'm not going to stay behind him and lose time. So there was more communication woes for Ferrari. He was very angry over the radio. A bit of a mess, but not as much of a mess as qualifying.
Yeah, I keep on saying, we hope and pray that they come back, but I actually don't have a lot of confidence that they do.
Ferrari have escaped the full force of my wrath this weekend, because despite Leclerc kind of shoving Albon into the gravel, Albon did not remain in the gravel, so it's fine.
It's probably not a good idea for Leclerc to risk the vengeance of the most patient fans in motorsport, in Williams fans. That's not a good omen.
Let's talk about that incident that you've referred to, the Albon-Leclerc incident. Now, this was an incident where it was Leclerc on the inside, Albon around the outside, and Leclerc kind of ran him out of road, pushed him onto the gravel, eventually had to give the position back. But I kind of felt that this deserved a penalty. What was our perspective?
Do you think it deserved a penalty even after he gave it back? Or?
Yes.
Okay.
Because I feel that he was robbed of at least an opportunity to go after a podium today.
Because Hamilton got past him as well.
Because it was essentially Leclerc sacrificing it. I don't think Ferrari lost out from it, because by Leclerc pushing Albon away, they end up getting that fourth place with one of the cars, and then getting sixth with the other. I felt Albon had an opportunity. Looking at how Hamilton's pace was at the end of that Grand Prix, I felt Albon could have gone after Piastri, and at least maybe got within a shot of doing so. What was our perspective?
To be fair, Albon was on older tyres, so I don't he wasn't. It's not like Hamilton, I think, had boxed under the safety car. So in terms of going after Piastri,
did he not?
Did Albon? Oh yes, he did. He put on used tyres, but he did box. Sorry, my mistake. I've got that wrong there. Albon did box then as well. But I mean, Leclerc, had he got a penalty, he would have dropped down to 9th, which would have elevated Russell, Sainz and Hadjar, just looking at the little timing screens. But I think, I think the precedent is usually if kind of you're allowed to kind of swap the place back instead of getting a penalty if there's no other cars that have got involved. But
in this case, Hamilton has benefited from the entire thing.
And Ferrari have benefited from Leclerc's move.
So to be honest, at the time, I mean, anyone who was in the probably about a mile vicinity of me watching that incident was aware that there was quite a lot of screaming involved.
I was aware.
And therefore, I'm so sorry. So to be honest, come the end, I was just glad that Albon was still on the track. Now I've had a few days to process. I'm a little more annoyed. It was fine, but it'll be annoying if it sets a precedent. And then and the FIA have kind of boxed themselves into, well, they can't do anything about it.
Yeah, Albon said as well after the race, maybe I should have been a bit more patient. I thought I could get Piastri for that podium, so I was pushing for it. That's what he said. And then I was like, no, don't back.
You shouldn't have. It's the opposite. You should be more impatient. And
exactly. Don't back down from that. You were the one who put a great move on Leclerc. You were going to make it around the outside, and Leclerc was the one that forced you off.
Yes.
Leclerc was complaining after the move. He was like, "Oh, so now if we're racing and he can't make the corner, I have to give it back."
He made the corner.
He made
Exactly.
the corner.
I have no idea what he was talking about, to be honest. I tend to agree with you, Anwar. I think it should have been a penalty regardless. Maybe mitigated by the fact that he gave the position back, so maybe 5-second penalty.
I'd like to say that I also think it should have been a penalty. I was just trying to be nice to it so I didn't get accused of being overly biased.
Yeah. But even if we look at the spirit of racing, it was wrong. We look at the regulations, the driving standards guidelines, I think it was wrong as well, because Albon had his front axle alongside Leclerc's front axle at the apex of the corner, so he was entitled to room. He wasn't given it. Penalty.
I think it's such an easy get out of jail free card by just giving the position back. It kind of tells me that as the FIA are happy as long as that happens, and they don't really care of the context surrounding it.
Yeah.
Because I know this didn't end up happening, but let's say Hamilton ended up getting the podium and getting past Piastri. I think the discourse around this should be much greater in that case, because that was a distinct possibility coming out of that incident. Now, we might be covering over it because of the fact that he didn't, but that if Hamilton did do that, it shows plain and clear that Albon was robbed of a podium. And that's something that this incident could have led to. And I think because of that, the punishment should be something that matches that type of...
Yeah, I think with the context, it just boils down to the common sense rule that's not really in place.
Applied. It's never really employed.
Yeah, the steward's judgment should be to use common sense. Ferrari have benefited at the end of the day, so, that should be a penalty.
Yeah, Albon, let's not forget, was in P3 before the safety car. He boxed and ended up in 4th behind Piastri.
To try and take advantage of
I'm assuming try and take advantage of the new tyres. Maybe he might have thought... I'm having a look. Daniel's got some nice tyre strategies graph on here.
Looks beautiful.
I know, it's great. His tyres were about the same age as Piastri. They were a lap older, but maybe, I guess with McLaren being a better car, he thought that Piastri would get him on the safety car restart, and that he kind of therefore wanted to kind of counter that, and thought it would be easier to go after him on newer tyres from kind of behind as opposed to trying to defend from in front. But he was in P3 come the safety car, and then he ended up P5. And I never thought I'd say this, but I was kind of disappointed with the P5. I thought he was on for a P3. If anything, I thought he was either on for P3 or losing P4 to Piastri.
Yeah.
Because the Ferraris, there was a pretty big gap between Albon and the Ferraris. Like Hamilton was kind of, or Leclerc, one of the two, was kind of closing a bit, but there was enough of a gap that it would have been kind of a fight come of the last few laps if kind of Albon had been caught by the Ferraris. It was by no means sort of Albon was going to end up 7th behind both Ferraris, and then he didn't. I'm still sad.
Ultimately, despite that incident, I think Williams will still be happy with the points that they've got out of it, I guess.
Williams have got 2 world-class drivers, as James Vowles loves to say, so they'll be happy with that.
They're in the typical no man's land 5th place in Formula 1 that we see nowadays in the constructors. Aston Martin have occupied it for the past couple of years, just kind of the solid 5th fastest team breaking into the top 4 with no one really to challenge them.
Yeah,
Williams have got 51 points in the standings. I'm so happy.
Look, I think it bodes well for the future of that team as well. So, I think there's a lot to be happy about there. I think the next topic I want to kind of talk about here is another midfield team, and it's a midfield team that Daniel just mentioned, and that is Aston Martin. Now, they've been absolutely anonymous for the majority of the season, and their points have come off the back of chaos races from courtesy
and
of
Lance Stroll.
Yeah, courtesy of Lance Stroll and his heroics. But this weekend we saw something different. They qualified both in the top 10, Alonso finishing qualifying with a nosebleed in 5th. But it just disappeared off the back of, I would call it, really poor strategy calls and a heap of bad luck too. How did we feel that the strategy team at Aston Martin were the reason for the screw up, or do we feel it was more bad luck?
To be honest,
they ultimately didn't score points in a race that they should have scored points in.
To be honest, Aston Martin did what I am going to patent as a reverse Ferrari, which is having a really good qualifying and then just a terrible race. But it was kind of weird because it's like when qualifying came and Alonso ended up in 5th, I was very surprised. I was like, how has this happened? And so when he then finished 11th, I was like, oh, this is more business as usual. But then when I started thinking about it, I was like, wait a minute, you were in 5th, now you're 11th.
They got caught out by the 2-stop because they both stopped early. They both stopped early and then proceeded not to stop under the full course safety car. Or have I got...
I think they did stop under the full safety car, but they did stop early before the virtual safety car, which is what kind of ruined it for them, because I think they were stuck amongst all those drivers who were kind of in a DRS train.
When Leclerc did his undercut, Alonso was part of that group of cars, the gaggle of cars behind Leclerc.
Yeah, I mean, it's not hard to see why he thinks he's the unluckiest driver in the world.
Oh my God, yeah, I forgot about that.
Heartbreaking radio from Alonso there, but... yeah, it was weird. I kind of blinked and they weren't in contention at all, to be honest. They brought so many upgrades this weekend. We thought it was a new day dawning for Aston Martin. Maybe Newey had worked in his lunch breaks was the narrative around the car.
Yeah, because I've heard the same thing about Newey having a little bit of influence or a little bit of an input here in this set of upgrades. And if that is true, that bodes well for their level of competitiveness. For the rest of the season, because if he is dropping in here and there to help with a few of these upgrades, maybe Aston Martin could be a little bit more of a force come the end of the season.
Yeah, I mean, it's entirely possible as well that they biased their setup a lot towards qualifying because that's what's been more important in Imola in the past. So they kind of sacrificed the race pace for that. They didn't use any new tyres during the race because they tend to scrub them in the practice session, which may have hindered their performance slightly.
They also used a medium in qualifying as well, so there was no fresh medium for them.
Exactly, that they were a few laps old. So there were a few factors that went against them, but largely it was the strategy, I think.
As a wise man once said, you can put a rocket ship and we will still be 11th.
And he was.
And he was.
All I want to see Alonso get some points, and we feel he's got so close.
Surely Monaco, right? If they've got a good qualifying car, which maybe based on that evidence, it is possible that he can. And he went there as well. He went well there as well, especially in 2023 when he was so close to pole.
He should have won that race.
He should have won that race. Really
definitely should have won that race.
But once again, why did he not win that race? Aston Martin's strategy.
Disaster class.
Oh no, it's Monaco's just a strategy race. They're going to finish 19th and 20th.
True, yeah. Yeah, damn it.
You heard it here first, folks.
I guess my question, what I'm going to ask is, just generally, do we think that they're going to... do you think this was a abnormal result, and they're going to return back to the normal, or do we think this is going to be the start of a little bit of a better sequence of races? What's our prediction?
I hope it's the start of a little bit of a sequence of races, It's the midfield has been interesting this year, because sometimes Haas has been in there, sometimes RB have been in there, Alpine sometimes been in there. Even Sauber managed to score points. Admittedly, that was when it was just by finishing the race, but nevertheless,
you've got to be there.
You've got to be there. But I hope that the midfield becomes interesting because, to be honest, while it is fun now having an actual battle sometimes up at the front for the wins. It is still, to be honest, sometimes the most exciting bit of a weekend is watching the drivers in 9th, 10th, 11th and 12th, especially if they're all really close, trying to fight for points. What
we'd want is fighting throughout the field and I guess having another car in that midfield battle because Aston Martin have been very much quicker than Kick, slower than everyone else.
Another car in the midfield battle, Cadillac reference.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
I personally do have a lot of faith in the new teams.
There's going to be another car in a battle with Cadillac because they will either be in a battle with Audi, or they will be in a battle with everyone else.
Or just their teammates if they're rubbish.
Yeah.
I guess what I want to move on to next is we've kind of done the Aston Martin discussion. Is the performance of a debutante this season at least. In Franco Colapinto, who he's come in for Jack Doohan, did we see a notable difference in performance from doing to Colapinto this weekend?
Well, Colapinto did his first lap crash in qualifying and not FP1 in Japan, so that is a notable difference. But no, to be honest, Colapinto had a fairly anonymous race, but I think Briatore said when he was giving an interview that all Colapinto has to do is drive consistently, not crash, and score some points. And I mean, in the race, he drove consistently and didn't crash.
But he didn't score points.
He didn't score points, but I'm guessing maybe the score points thing is over the whole... Did Gasly score? Gasly also didn't score points.
Yes.
So
it seemed like Alpine didn't have the car for it this weekend.
Colapinto seemed okay, to be honest. I mean, not really any harm not having a great weekend start off with.
There were a couple replays where he just got absolutely mugged down the inside at one of the corners. It might be Tosa or something, but he just opened the door and the floodgates opened. But on the whole, the pace wasn't too bad for a first weekend when he hasn't got pre-season testing or anything. Obviously, the qualifying...
He's done quite a bit of testing, actually.
In previous cars?
His previous cars, but it's not as if he's done nothing for the first 7 races.
Yeah, I guess so, but yeah.
You seem like he's...
I mean, he would be dead last if he hadn't done anything all year. But the crash was maybe expected. In all honesty,
I think we could all agree.
It was inevitable, really, wasn't it? But hopefully he's got it out of the way now and he can focus on pace.
It was inevitable. I'm sure he maybe would have preferred it to be slightly less car wrecking, a more slightly slide into the wall, but nevertheless. And it was in qualifying. And it may have been because of his crash which brought out the red flag, but he did technically make it into Q2, so that's something.
Look, it was a performance. It was a weekend which was, I would describe, a whole lot of meh.
He was there.
He was there. One of the races.
Alpine certainly had 2 cars there.
Colapinto got it into Q2, but Behrman didn't, even though he set a lap time that was good enough. And the red flag panel wasn't out yet.
Let's talk about the hot mess that was that. I know we don't usually talk about quali, but
I think it's worth talking about.
I actually have an explanation for this. The explanation that's kind of hidden in the regulations is that yes, Behrman crossed the line, and then the red flag panel showed up. Right, it started flashing, but the difference is, in the start gantry, the lights go red once the session's finished.
Yep.
But they also go orange, which kind of means abort the lap. And the lights were orange when Behrman was crossing the line. Mm-hmm. So I guess that's kind of the logic that they used, and that there was still a sign that his lap time would be deleted, even if it wasn't a red flag sign. Yeah. It was a sign that there's a caution, your time will get deleted. But
I guess the other thing that I've seen is there's a delay from when the race director presses the red flag button or whatever it is, or whatever that starts that procedure. And then that showing up on the gantry. There is a delay when doing that, so I guess that's also something that plays a factor. I think that's always happened. That's always been a thing, though.
There was something like, I don't know, it was either 3/10 or 300ths. I can't remember which one it was. Between the race director pressed the button and then 3/10 later, Behrman crossed the line to finish his lap. And I can see why Haas were very annoyed. Both Haas and Sauber, which was really funny, seemed to be going for the passive aggression strategy of just leave the drivers in the car.
Well, actually,
even
the Sauber was aggression, no passive.
Literally, but Behrman stayed in the car even after Bortoletto was already out driving around the track, which was kind of funny, to be honest. But I can see why Haas were annoyed, because it wasn't like Behrman was just going to sneak into Q2 by a couple of thousand. He was in P12 with his lap time.
I think it's one of those ones where it's such a specific scenario that we won't really... I don't know if we see something like that happen for quite a while. I think it's just one of those rare occurrences.
We'll either never see it again, or it will happen in the next 4 races consecutively, I'm calling it.
Fair enough. I think another performance of note that we probably should talk about, or at least refer to, is the Yuki Tsunoda performance this weekend. He started from the pit lane after a horrible incident in qualifying. Thankfully walked out of that uninjured by the looks of things. Then proceeded to go from pit lane to 10th. Now, I will caveat this by saying, I would say the strategy, the fact that the events in the race happened the way they did help him in that regard. I don't think he was particularly stellar on pace, or really signing through the field with his overtakes, but he was there, he got a point. I guess do we think, have we been impressed by Tsunoda, or is this what we expect or the bare minimum? What's our feelings towards his start here at Red Bull?
Surely 10th place in a Red Bull is bare minimum of acceptable. Obviously, when you start from the pit lane, it's a bit more impressive.
But that's his fault for being in the pit lane as well.
That's correct. They changed a lot of things on the car, and that was as a result of his huge shunt in qualifying, which didn't look so bad when we cut to it, but then the replay, it was like, oh my
The
goodness.
replay was just a horrible
I'm
mess.
so glad he's okay after
Yeah.
that, because that was almost, upside down Joe 22 Silverstone flashbacks, But
Probably worked this time though.
yeah. Tsunoda's strategy, he tried a one-stop. He executed the one-stop pretty well, actually. Nico Hulkenberg also did that, and they finished 10th and 12th, respectively. So obviously it wasn't a horrible option to try. He boxed under the virtual safety car and just went to the end, which was good enough. He pulled a few good moves off as well along the way, so a good recovery is what I'd say.
Yeah, I'd say it was fine, to be honest. I mean, given that admittedly they were on scrub tyres, but he had Alonso behind him, at the end.
And then survived the attack.
And survived that attack, which, I mean, we say kind of bare minimum in a Red Bull, but I still don't think Hadjar's ready for the Red Bull seat. Even though he's been doing some kind of good performances in the RB, I hope Red Bull can realise that as well. He needs kind of some more time to get used to that car, and they're not going to put Lawson back in. So I think Tsunoda's doing enough to not get replaced, which, to be honest, is kind of all he needs to do. It's not like last year or the year before where it was Red Bull were needed to preserve a Constructors' Championship.
They've not got a shot on it, let's be honest, in terms of achieving that goal. I think there's a distinction here. I wouldn't say he's doing well, but he's doing enough to stay in the seat. I think they're two very different
It's
things.
the typical Red Bull second driver situation of what else are you going to do? We've said it for years now. So
Yeah, there's ultimately no other feasible options for them. I think you're right in saying Hadjar, he's too raw for you to put into that car. He's clearly shown a good amount of pace, and the same way Tsunoda showed good pace over the course of last season, and I guess the beginning of this season in the RB as well. But I think it's going to be one of them. We're going to hope and pray that he develops over the season before ultimately they try something else. I feel.
How do you know when he's ready though? Because he's already performing, and they put Liam Lawson in after
When
he
he's
had.
performing, he's doing just enough. Oh, who's?
Hadjar. When do you know
yeah.
when he's ready for the Red Bull seat? Because they put Lawson in when he had cumulatively a season of experience, and that didn't work. But is that because he was inexperienced, or was it because he just couldn't drive a car?
I think it's pure. It's not even pace that's going to be the determination of whether he's ready or not. It's going to be how many races he got under his belt. I think that's the more important measure, particularly for a Red Bull. That is very hard to handle.
Right, but if it's hard to handle, surely getting more laps in the Racing Bull isn't exactly going to help handle that, because he's just going to get set in his mind the driving style in the Racing Bull and make it even harder to adjust to the Red Bulls. So it's a hard situation to know exactly when or if he's ready.
Yeah, you make a fair point, because I was going down the route of maybe racecraft, race IQ and that type of thing, and developing that side of it. But that really hasn't been the problem for some of these Red Bull drivers. It's been pure pace and
It's been driving style, really.
drivability.
Yeah.
Right. You make a fair point. Let's move on to our predictions now. As we begin to close out the show, let's look at who wants to go first in revealing how well these predictions.
I think I'm okay to go first. Let me just find the notebook page that has this week's predictions. There we go.
You've got
Okay, yeah.
Cool. Take us away, Lucy.
I said Norris would be on pole, which was not correct, sadly. Although we did get a McLaren on pole, so internally I'm saying that I at least got that right. I also said Norris would get P1, which he didn't.
You will get a point for that, though.
I will get a point because he got P2. I said Russell... I didn't say Russell was going to get P2. I said Antonelli was going to get P2.
Yeah.
We're not talking about that. I was delusional because it was his home race, and I've learnt my lesson from that, and I'm never doing that again. Piastri P3, got that one perfectly right. Piastri's finally listened to my advice and just be less good at winning. So thank you, Oscar. I said Russell P4. He was not there. Mercedes had a fairly anonymous race. I thought they'd be closer than they actually were, to be honest. It seemed like they thought they'd be closer than they
I
actually
think
were.
they were probably the fourth. I think The Ferraris in the race were quicker. The Williams in the race were probably quicker. Fifth fastest car this weekend, I guess, in the race at least. So they're definitely a little bit of a down step for them.
And then Albon P5. So that's another 3 beautiful points for me.
So good start, good haul that is.
Yeah, and then...
We'll finish the top 5 first, so Daniel, do you want to go next?
Not really.
I've seen your pole position.
All right, let's get it out of the way. Pole position was supposed to be Kimi Antonelli.
I don't think it was ever on.
You know what? Let's move on. No,
I came
Antonelli...
up to you before we went to go watch the race, and I was like, so how do you feel about saying Antonelli was going to be on pole position?
No, how was I supposed to know that he was going to buckle under the pressures of a home race, which is definitely what happened? He did actually say, he said after the race that a possible explanation for his lack in pace was that he just wasted too much energy in the lead up to the weekend, which is something we see from these young drivers in terms of they're saying yes to too many media commitments, or because it's their home race, they've got a lot of fans demanding things from them, and it kind of takes it out of them. So he didn't have as much in reserve for the competitive sessions. You know, he wasted energy because it's because that too. I'm just trying to say there is a factor that I couldn't have predicted, which is Antonelli wasting energy. Okay, top 5, Verstappen P1. He did exactly what I thought he would, put a good move on at the start and just stayed there, pretty much controlled the race. Piastri P2, which is a point.
Yep.
He was on track for P2 probably until Norris changed tyres at the safety car and then overtook him with a good move around the outside. P3 was Antonelli, so yeah, we won't talk about that again. It's actually his first DNF of the year, which is a shame that it's its own race.
I guess it's not even his fault, let's be honest.
Yeah, no, true.
Although he wasn't in a P3 position.
No, not even close. Well, he wasn't in top 6 either, Lucy, so there we go. For your random prediction. In case you're wondering why it wasn't a virtual safety car and it was a full safety car with the Antonelli stoppage, it was because Bortoletto's car was in the access road on the same length of straight, and they were like, okay, well, Antonelli stopped a bit further up anyway, we'll take him up the hill to the next marshal post, which required a recovery vehicle, so it was just going to take a lot longer to get there, and they had to clear a load of signs out the way, apparently. Not Carlos signs, just road signs.
Just get injected.
So yeah, that's why it took so long.
Speaking of Carlos
Sainz, he did not get the P4 position.
The wrong Williams.
In
terms of getting in that area.
In terms of getting into top 5, it was...
Who would have thought basing your predictions off of the names of people who did well in the 1980s wouldn't have worked?
I'm not proud of it. It's a Crofty level stat, isn't it, in terms of reaching and tedious links.
It's exactly what we want on the podcast.
That just wasn't even close, was it? P5 was Russell. You asked me in the preview why have I put Russell so low down. You should have asked me why he's so high up for this race, because he finished 7th in the end, which is poor from Mercedes.
Yeah, I was also one of those who backed Mercedes to at least get 2 cars in the top 5. So this top 5 isn't looking too hot for me, I'll be honest. I had Pole Verstappen, but he was close to it, but didn't get it. So no points there, it was Piastri. I then said Norris would win the race, which he didn't finish second, so a point there. I put Piastri, I decided on a McLaren 1-2, Piastri finishing second, that's another point there, and I put Verstappen in third. Didn't expect the Red Bull in his hands to be that competitive. I'm going off the back of what we saw in Miami.
Yeah, fair enough, completely.
Where they were dominant by 30 seconds or so, and then we look here and they are equal on pace pretty much, I'd say.
Yeah.
So that was a bit of a surprise. And then, like I mentioned previously, I went double Mercedes here, so I went Russell 4th, Antonelli 5th. 0 points either way. It's not a great look. I think it's just very difficult to determine who's going to be that 4th there. Sometimes there'll be a Ferrari in there, sometimes the Mercedes are both there, sometimes neither of them are there, maybe a Williams is there, who knows. So I think 4th and 5th is actually hard to predict generally here. Who wants to go first with their DNF? Lucy,
should I go now? Yeah, my DNF I said Verstappen, that obviously didn't happen, so no points there.
No.
And my random prediction, which I am very mad at Ferrari about, is someone DNF'd while running in the top 6, and Antonelli was 7th when he DNF'd because it just got overtaken by Lewis Hamilton. And if I had the powers of time travel, I would say, hey Hamilton, Antonelli's engine is going to die anyway, can you just leave him in P6 for the moment? I promise it's worth it.
3 points for the Warwick F1 show podcast. Yeah, it's unlucky. It's a good prediction, actually. It just didn't work out for you.
No.
I don't think any of these worked out for anyone in truth. Daniel, do you want to go next?
Oh, certainly didn't work out for me. I put DNF Norris. I'm kind of glad it didn't come in, actually. I don't... Oh, yeah, I said he was going to have a coming together with Verstappen or something.
It would have been funny if our predictions had ended up both making each other true and they had both DNF.
Norris and Verstappen take each other out. Yeah, that would have been...
A double whammy.
Yeah, I mean, I did predict him to win.
Ideally,
so.
while running in the top 6 and while they're colliding, Colapinto overtakes around the outside.
Around the outside of turn 1, which segues into my random prediction, which is that Colapinto overtakes someone around the outside of turn 1. I don't think he overtook anyone. Really. It didn't look like it. He just got overtaken a lot and just survived.
He was the one who was getting overtaken.
He was, yeah. Not even around the outside, just on the inside, just getting mugged.
So no points there. I also got no points out of my DNF and random prediction because I said Hadjar DNF, he finished in 9th. And I put Ollie Behrman in the points as my random prediction. Now, the Hasses were absolutely like poo. Horror. Might as well not have turned up to the track. So that's how it was. So Lucy, I believe you got 7 points, and then Daniel, you got 4, I got 2. So not very high scores across the board.
Wait! I finally
won.
I won a Warwick
You
prediction.
won a weekend.
Congratulations.
I'm never coming back on this podcast again. We
You
got to
got
leave
to
it
put
on a
us on
high.
edge.
Enjoy it while it lasts.
Whoa. Guys, we got to keep Imola on the calendar. I need to keep getting these wins.
Every year, Imola's going to be the one that you win.
Listen, if Verstappen won here for the 4th year in a row, like I can win the predictions challenge for you.
Well, it's easy when you don't predict P4 based off a guy who raced 50 years ago in Carlos Reutemann.
That was one of the mistakes of all time.
I was just trying to provide some historical value to the podcast.
You would have looked like a genius if it turned out.
Yeah.
Obviously, it didn't turn out.
Yeah.
Never trying anything different or exciting again.
I know. We're never talking about history again, guys.
No history, no random facts, none of that anymore.
Just the future.
So that brings us to the end of this episode. Thank you guys very much for coming on, Lucy and Daniel. We'll see you at some point later in the week for our preview of the really exciting Monaco Grand Prix, which is going to be filled with overtakes.
I hope that wasn't sarcastic.
Yeah, it's pure sarcasm.
Can't wait for Saturday.
It will be an exciting Saturday, put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
But until then, which will be in a few days, we'll thank you guys very much for watching and listening, and we'll see you then. Goodbye.